Because I think sometimes people look at their diet and it's like it's too much to change everything, and it is. So I would say start by adding fibre. If you're going to do one thing to reduce your risk of heart disease, add your fibres.
This is what the shocker, heart disease,
yeah.
the different symptoms in men and women, because I did not know this and I now do.
No matter what talk I'm doing, whether I'm talking about gut health or anything, I'll actually come in and go, by the way, did you know heart attack symptoms can look quite different in women? Because what we tend to see is the whole term ultra processed and the idea that any food that has had a process and a food additive put in is bad for you is rubbish. So this idea where we ought to be scrutinising labels and worried about every ingredient in there, we just need to relax a little bit. And apart from being a dietitian, I have a master's in European food regulation, so I do a lot around food additives and I work in that area quite a lot. And there's some that we would limit, but there's none that we need to be terrified about that we would run away from. And the vast, vast majority of food additives, you know, we see E numbers, are totally safe. That we want it to be ideally when we're drinking, that we're having maybe 2 or 3 drinks if we are drinking and then stop. So that's probably double. That'd be 2 drinks in that, unfortunately. An actual sort of measure for wine is around 100 mils. So kind of a small glass. And as a good rule, you don't go past the curve. I would love people to enjoy a really good treat and never think about it again. No guilt. Just eat and forget. I'd love you to do that.
Welcome to the Dig podcast. My name is Caroline O'Neill and I am your host. Before we get started, I just want to ask you a quick favour. So if you're watching on YouTube, believe me, loads of people watch and they haven't subscribed yet. So just hit that subscribe button. It really helps the podcast. And also if you're watching on Spotify or listening on Spotify or listening on Apple, if you hit that follow button, it means a lot to us because we're able to reach out to more guests. They've heard of the Dig podcast and we're able to get amazing people sitting beside me in the hot seat, and I have an amazing person today. Today I am joined by Sarah Keogh. Do you know her? If you don't, you're going to know her after this. She is one of Ireland's leading dietitians with over 20 years experience helping families, workplaces and communities to eat better and to feel better. That's what the most important thing is. She's the founder of Eatwell and she's a consultant dietitian with the Coeliac Society of Ireland. Now, how did I meet her? I heard Sarah speaking at a wonderful event in Enniskillen. It was with Waterways Ireland, if anyone's ever heard of that. And I knew that I had to ask her to be a guest on the Dig podcast. Why? Because do you ever just meet someone or listen to them speaking and you actually take in their knowledge and you pass it on? I rang my mummy going down the road and I was like, Mummy, you need to know this about heart disease. We need to talk to Daddy about this and myself as well. So when somebody passes on that knowledge with such impact, I was like, Dig podcast guest. Definitely, if she will say yes. And she did. She's travelled the whole way to be here today and she's sitting right beside me. Welcome to the Dig podcast, Sarah. Thank you for being here, for making the journey.
Oh, no problem. It was great to come up.
I know, and it's always an honour for anybody to say yes, but to have you here, and I know you're so full of knowledge and can help us all. So we're going to dive straight in, because the reason why I loved it when you spoke in Enniskillen was because you didn't scare the life out of us.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of scary content out there and a lot of scary not scary, I suppose. You can feel overwhelmed and afraid when there's knowledge put out that you don't know how to deal with or understand. So you were really good at helping to make me understand it anyway. So talk to us about what is a dietitian, what is nutrition, what do we need to be thinking about?
Oh wow, that's a whole question. So well, a dietitian is someone, we're a medical sort of background with it. So dietitians would often work in hospitals, and that's where I would have started out with it. So you've got to go to university, you do a degree in nutrition, and then you get you have to register in the same way doctors register, nurses register. Dietitian, the title dietitian is legally protected. So say I qualified that quite a long time ago, and then I worked in head and neck cancer for a few years and got a really interest in gut health from there. But dietitians, really what we would do is we would be nutritionists, and then we would have further education around how to use nutrition to treat disease. So that could be working with cancer patients. It could be working, lots of my colleagues would work in ICU, kind of really, really sick people, but right through to from, education around pregnancy. It's just hugely varied, which is a lovely way to kind of do the job, because you can do so much with it, which is great.
Yes, and I suppose where do you start when it comes to, say we're talking about the normal layman on the ground or laywoman when it comes to nutrition? Where should we be starting when we're thinking about what we're putting in our bodies?
the thing I'd say to anybody is don't overcomplicate it, because as soon as people start to think about nutrition, suddenly they're like, well, I have to read these 5 books and I have to watch 22 YouTube videos and everybody's saying different things. And suddenly people are like, well, carbs, no carbs, is dairy in, is dairy out? You know, what am I supposed to avoid? And I always say this, go back to normal healthy eating guidelines. And everybody hates them because like they're not sexy, they're not popular, they're kind of boring, they've been around, but they are so rooted in science that they're actually very, very good. And we often just talk about the 5 food groups. You know, you've got your fruit and veg, you've got your whole grain carbs, you've got your sort of dairy or calcium foods, protein foods, and then fats. And if you're ticking the box for all of those, kind of just breathe after that. You can really make it complicated. You know, people say to me, how much protein? And I'm saying, well, you know, scientifically, it's like 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. And you can just see people tuning out, whereas it's like, have a bit with each meal, you'll be grand, you know. So you can overthink it with that. So I'd say just don't make it too complicated for yourself.
And I like that bit, you'll be grand if you kind of, but I suppose whenever you're thinking about, well, first of all, if we're thinking about what's on our plate, a big thing, and I've just spoken to John Woods, who's the founder of Linwood's before you come in, is portion size is a big thing, isn't it? Because I remember you talking at that event in Enniskillen and showcasing, I think you were using your fists and stuff, but talk to us about portion size, and is there a problem with portion size here in this country?
Yes, definitely. I mean, 2 things I would say, and one of the simplest, if you're doing anything on nutrition, is you get your plate, and for lunch and dinner, you want 1/3 to 1/2 of that plate is some sort of vegetables or salad or a bowl of vegetable soup or something like that. 1/4 of it is going to be your protein. So that's meat, chicken, fish, beans, eggs, anything like that. And 1/4, maybe up to 1/3 if you're doing a lot of exercise, is your carbs. And whole grain if possible. So whole grain bread or brown rice. Now, if you hate it, the white is fine. But those are the proportions. If you think of your plate like that, that most of what goes, when you look at your plate for lunch and dinner, most of what's looking back at you should be some sort of fruit or veg. But what you do need to watch as well is the size of the plate. That's been the big thing. So plate sizes are 3 inches bigger all round today than they were, say, in the 70s.
Right, definitely. That's
Really?
right.
So, I would lecture to nutrition, and one of the things I often get my students to do, and I've got them to do in the past, is I bring them a dinner plate from the 70s, courtesy of my parents, and a dinner plate from today, and I get them to fill it, and then we get them to do the nutrition analysis of that. And if you do the plate from the 70s, we do spaghetti bolognese. So if you do spaghetti bolognese from the 70s and you completely fill the plate, it's about 800 calories. But if you take the same spaghetti bolognese and completely fill the plate from today, it's 1,900 calories. So lots of people say to me, well, I'm having the same spaghetti bolognese I've been making for the last 40 years. And you're going, yep, but it is more than twice the size. But the plate, we fill the plate. I think we're very visual eaters as well. So the plate has to be full. No, you know, I think particularly in Ireland, no white bits, you know, and be seeing the pattern, you have to fill the whole plate. So that's part of it, is that we don't need these giant plates all the time.
That's a mindset shift now. Especially for older generations, do you not think, where you're...
It is for everybody. And you're just trying to say, look, you'll get used to it, which is the funny thing. Like you used to eat dinner off this plate. You know, and it wasn't when you were 6, it's, you know, you were in your 20s, 30s, but even today, just that step down. Because I think the other thing a lot of us do is whatever is in front of us, we finish it.
Yes,
So
we were taught that.
You're not getting up from that table, that plate is cleared, you know, that kind of thing with it. So even if it's a huge amount of food, you know, people will finish it. And I'd often say to people, like, if you ever got to the end of a meal and you're nearly forcing in the last few mouthfuls, and you're like, what is your body trying to tell you if you're actually forcing in the food? And it's like a light bulb for people. They go, oh, I don't actually have to finish. And that actually isn't even just dinner. It's the big bag of crisps or it's the bar of chocolate. They're kind of like, you don't actually have to eat the last bit. You can if you want. But, you know, if you're kind of lost interest, which, you know, the way I always find this with chocolate, the first mouthful is gorgeous. And then by the end of it, you're like, take it or leave it. It's like, that's okay. You can leave it and come back to it tomorrow, you know. But it's that idea that you don't have to finish everything.
I know. And me and you were talking before we started about carveries, for example, and I suppose when you know you're going for a good carvery, and John Woods talked about this too, it's my daddy would think the bigger, the more heaped up, the better. Yeah. And you did put a spin on carvery, where you think it's a great meal for people.
I actually think they're brilliant. I mean, I absolutely agree. Some of the portion sizes are enormous. And I know the whole thing is like, I'd say a lot of people don't even care what food tastes like as long as there's plenty of it, you know. So some of the carveries do, but I see now a lot of the carveries do a smaller plate or a half plate, which I think is fantastic. But I was saying, what I love about carveries, and I'm on the road a good bit, loads of veg. Like you want to try and get half your plate of veg. A carvery is absolutely the place to stop. So, you know, they always have the cabbage, the carrots, all the rest. Meat is always really good. Potatoes, you don't always have to have the roast potatoes. You know, that way, like you can actually create a really, really healthy meal. And when I was doing clinics with people, I'd often say to them, if you're traveling a lot, look out for the good carvery, because every town has you know, the really
that
good
hotel
carvery.
that does the carvery.
And you just know, but it's actually very, very good. It can be really, how you're picking in that can actually be really good. But you might just go to the smaller plate. Or when the chef is putting like the third slice of roast beef out, you might go, you know, maybe two. Is it enough, you know?
No, it's funny, isn't it? Just that relationship with food and how we always see lots being a positive.
Yeah.
And
But that's in a lot of cultures. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, we don't, I mean, realistically, it's only in the last 60, 70 years that we all have, particularly say in Ireland, access to enough food. And not everybody does, and I'm aware of that, but as
Yeah.
a general. So there is that thing, you better eat that now because you might be hungry later. And I'd often say to people, you know, don't be eating now in case you're hungry later. Eat now for what you need. And then if you get hungry later, eat something then. But this planning ahead, like I might be hungry, you're going to get hungry anyway. You know, you don't need to overfill yourself just in case.
such good advice. I know it's a big thing. It's a big thing just with food and families and how you're brought up and how you have to change your mindset, shift
Yeah.
anything. And I suppose people now are dealing with a thing that wasn't as big years ago with the ultra processed foods.
Oh yeah.
Talk to us about, for people who don't understand, because sometimes I get mixed up. What is ultra processed foods? Because there's processed and ultra processed.
There is. So to be honest, I regard this as a big scaremongering exercise to frighten people out of perfectly okay foods to eat. So
I love
I'm
it.
not a fan. So what we have with foods is I'm going to go through, give me a minute and I'll go through it. So you have unprocessed food, which is an apple. Okay. If you take that apple and you squeeze it to make apple juice, that's now a processed food because it has undergone a process. Okay. And then if you take the same apple and you have the apple juice and then you put a sweetener into it, that's now an ultra processed food.
Okay.
So basically it's had something done to it and had food additives added in. And that's a very basic kind of way of looking at it. What I dislike about it is a lot of people go, well, I never eat any processed food. So I was like, honestly, if you've cooked your dinner, that is a processed meal.
Right.
Like as soon as you've cooked a food, you have processed it. And my favorite one is talking about someone making like, you know, like brown bread, wheaten bread, soda bread, and you have put bread soda in it, which is a food additive. So when you make your wheaten soda bread at home, you have cooked it, which is a process, and then you've added a food additive, so now it's ultra processed.
Right. And that's a good,
perfectly healthy food. So what I'm trying to say is the whole term ultra processed and the idea that any food that has had a process and a food additive put in is bad for you is rubbish.
Do you ever feel like you've no energy, your immune system's low, or perhaps you want to pay more attention and help maintain your cholesterol levels? Well, then you'll want to find out more about cold milled flaxseed from Linwood's Health Foods, who are our sponsor of the Dig podcast. They create amazing products. Small changes every day can help you feel better. And with just 20 grams of the milled cold flaxseed added to your porridge, your yogurt, your smoothie, your cereal, you can start to feel those benefits. And you can pick them up in any major supermarkets, Whole Food stores, or you can buy them online at linwoodshealthfoods.com, and you can enter DIG20 and get 20% off. Get them delivered to your door and start to feel the benefits of these small changes every day.
What I would go back to, and what a lot of people get excited about with the ultra processed foods, is what we would have called 10 years ago treat foods.
What is it?
Treat foods.
Treat
so when we
foods.
talk about
Oh, right.
biscuits and cakes and crisps and all of those things. And guess what? If you eat a lot of them, no, you're not terribly healthy. So we all know that. So I think what's happened is that the ultra processed food is a big scary term and it looks good on headlines and it scares the heck out of people. But it's just don't eat a lot of treat foods. Go back into the good stuff. But what comes into ultra processed, which are very good foods, things like yogurts, not all yogurts, but some breads that you would buy that are whole grain. And we know from studies those foods are still very good for you. So even though technically they would come under the heading of ultra processed, they're absolutely fine. So this idea where we ought to be scrutinizing labels and worried about every ingredient in there, we just need to relax a little bit. And apart from being a dietitian, I have a master's in European food regulation. So I do a lot around food additives and I work in that area quite a lot. And there's some that we would limit, but there's none that we need to be terrified about that we would run away from. And the vast, vast majority of food additives, you know, we see E numbers, are totally safe. Yeah, and remember, lots of normal things have an E number. Vitamin C, E300 is vitamin C.
I wouldn't know that. I don't know that.
But why would you? You see E300 on it and you're like, oh my God, that's an ultra processed food.
I'm not joking you, Sarah. I'd read it and go, right, no. I wouldn't take it then.
And you know everyone has gone on about turmeric and curcumin? Well,
Yeah.
E100 is curcumin.
Right.
So if you see E100 on a food, and
So why is it called that? And is it to do with regulations?
It's to do with regulations. So what we do is under this fantastic food regulations around kind of food additives and things like that. So what we do is they're just given a number, and then with that, then there is a lot of research behind it, and they're updated and monitored all the time. You know, if concerns come up, you'll see places like, Food Standards Agency, the European Food Safety Authority, they're going to have a look at what's the new evidence that might be coming out by around any food additives. They might change the levels that are permitted, things like that, but they're watching it all the time. Now things happen, but I would always go, like potatoes would fail the testing that food additives have to go through. So when you get a potato and there's a green bit on it,
Yeah.
what do you do with that?
You cut the green bit out.
Why?
Why do you cut it out? Because it looks bad. And
You've just been taught to always
cut out the bad bits.
It's actually quite bad for you. Now, if you eat a bit of it, you're not going to die or anything, but a lot of it eaten together actually is dangerous during pregnancy and things like that. So we just automatically throw it away.
Yeah.
So like if Sir Walter Raleigh arrived in Europe today with a potato and the European Food Safety Authority had a look at it, they'd be like, absolutely no way. That chemical in there can cause miscarriage. So, it would be bad. So potatoes would fail the testing that food additives have to pass. So what I would say is we'll keep an eye on it. It's a rolling thing. It's not that their food additives are put out and everybody goes, oh, they're fine. They're watched all the time. So there's definitely some that they're limiting a little bit more, things like phosphates and things like that, which aren't bad for you. It's just we're getting a lot of them, that kind of thing. So we're watching some of those, but we don't need to be putting back every single thing that has an E number on it.
Right. That's hard hitting there now, because I just thought E's were bad.
Everybody does. And actually, I don't know if you probably don't remember, but in the mid-90s, there was a whole book out about E numbers. So this isn't new. This was about 30 years ago, this whole scare about E numbers. And guess what happened after 5 years? Everyone forgot about them and moved on to the next trend.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be worried about them.
Okay, good. That's really good to know. And I suppose that bit about ultra processed food, they're not all bad, and we're going to be encountering them every day. So we need to relax, is the word you would say, in some ways.
I mean, the main thing is to keep going with your fresh food as much as possible, that you're having your fruit and your veg and your fresh meat and things like that. But if you happen to buy a pizza the odd time, really you don't need to be lying awake at night worrying about it.
Love that. Okay, that's good. That's good, because life is busy and sometimes you do need that convenience.
Yep.
And you're a mum, I'm a mum, there's parents watching, caregivers, and sometimes you need to stick that pizza in and not beat yourself up all night and all week.
And a happy mother is for happy children.
A happy mother is for happy, and a happy father. Yes. Now let's talk about, I suppose there's the food that we're consuming, but then there's also the liquids that we're consuming. So let's talk about alcohol, because that was at that event. That was when I heard everybody go, and it was because you showed us, and we're going to actually, for the first time ever, we're going to do an experiment on the Dig podcast. It's the first time we've done anything like this. So alcohol, talk to me about alcohol and how there's men and women listen to the Dig podcast, Sarah, and we have a man in the room as well in the production team. Eamon's here today. How does it affect men and women differently? Because it does, doesn't it?
It can do. I mean, fundamentally it's a lot of the same things, but what we do know is because women have a little more fat on their bodies and a little more water proportionally compared to men, how we can get drunk a little quicker. You get a sensation of a little bit quicker, but also some of the harms of alcohol will affect women a little bit quicker. Now, that doesn't mean men have like a get out of jail free card when it comes to drinking. The sad news is that the World Cancer Research Fund tells us that there's no safe level for alcohol, which is very depressing when I read that. Sometimes it's very hard to be a dietitian. But
right, no safe level.
No safe level. So their actual advice is less is good and none is better. But what we do know is that risk increases, like anything, the more that you sort of drink with it. So we're really talking about limiting it. And I think one of the things that we'd look at kind of across Ireland is we have a culture where we do drink quite a bit. And it means that what's normal for us is actually quite a lot, particularly compared to a lot of other countries with that. I'd often say, by the time you're feeling the alcohol, that's kind of your body telling you that it's no longer coping. And it's supposed to be where you stop drinking, whereas I find lots of people kind of go, yay, it's working, and they keep going. So, it's just easing back. And I think it's, as I said, it's a very cultural thing just to keep going with it. And I always think, to be honest, there's a lot more pressure on men to drink than women. I think that's starting to ease, but I think a lot of guys would be in, you have to do a round, and if there's 6 of you, well then that's 6 pints, and then if one guy goes again, well now you've got to do 12 pints. Whereas that rounds thing seems to, people are breaking into smaller groups, guys aren't feeling under the same pressure. And I think the 0-0 alcohol beers coming out have actually been fantastic, because they still feel like when I'm having a drink, I'm out with my friends, I'm socializing, which is so important, but I don't actually have to have 12 pints just because I'm out in a round with the lads.
So true. And there is that kind of break into the market of the no alcohol drinks, as you say. I just recently met, Spencer Matthews. He has Clean Co. So he's released his whole range of, all because he's moved away from that feeling of not wanting to feel the after effects of alcohol.
That's it.
And because next day is not very good for anybody that's in your company either if you have overindulged.
But even at small levels, and I would do I do a lot of corporate wellness talks and things like that, and a very popular one is one I do called Feeding Your Mental Health, and we talk about different ways that foods and nutrients and all different things affect your mood and your energy levels. But it's so interesting when you say to people, alcohol is a depressant. Like, if you are feeling depressed and you drink alcohol, it's a depressant. So, if you wake up, and that can last 2 or 3 days after you drink, and it's not even that if you actually drink a huge amount, like if you even have 2 or 3 drinks, you just can see the mood is a little bit lower. And as you said, it's not just yourself, it's everybody around you with that. So it's, if people are struggling with mood, sometimes the urge is, well, I'll have a glass of wine, but actually maybe sometimes don't, because you're going to feel better the next day if you don't.
Right. Well, let's say I decide I'm going to have a glass, because lots of people do like to have a glass socially or on wine. And as you say, there's nothing wrong with that either. We do. But let's see what a real glass of wine looks like. Now, I'm going to pour you what I would call, so maybe once every month, Jared and I would share a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And on Friday night when we're watching our show or whatever. And this is what I would pour for me.
Okay.
Dun, dun, dun. You're going to see now, if anybody's listening to this on Spotify, no, Apple, you're going to need to tune in on YouTube or on Spotify. So I'm just trying to, yeah. So Jared's sitting over, he's waiting on me coming over, or he's pouring me one. And I would say, that means I don't have to get up again for another wee minute or two. So, that'll do my first glass anyway. And I would pour Jared the same. And I would come over and he's happy and I'm happy. Talk to me about this.
So one of the things about alcohol, and we talk about limiting alcohol with that we want it to be ideally when we're drinking, that we're having maybe 2 or 3 drinks if we are drinking and then stop. So that's probably double. That'd be 2 drinks in that, unfortunately.
Okay. Do you want to pour
I will pour. So
we can
an actual sort of measure for wine is around 100 mils. So kind of a small glass. And as a good rule, you don't go past the curve.
Okay.
On the glass.
Let's hold these up together for people to see. So that's mine, and that's what it should be for those. So for those who can't see, mine is a good double more than what Sarah's poured out. So actually a bottle would only last wouldn't last Jared and I, but that's all we would take. But I mean, yeah. So what about this in relation to what I should be drinking safe-wise?
So when we talk about sort of binge drinking, we talk about maybe 6 standard drinks or 6 units being a binge. And the reason that we would talk to it, and I know when I say that, like, so 6 standard drinks would be maybe 2 of those,
okay,
2.5. Might be 3 pints of beer, depending on the strength of the beer. And I know when I say 3 pints of beer is a binge, like particularly the guys that I'm talking to are like, seriously, like nobody thinks that's a binge. We think a binge is drunk or falling over, but that's the point where we can measure liver damage. And although it might heal and repair, potentially you scar it, which is the issue. But the big thing about alcohol, and don't get me wrong, I love a glass of wine as well, okay? So it's sometimes very hard to be a dietitian when you're talking about this. But the reality is we know that people who drink a lot more do get a little more dementia. They do get an increased risk of some cancers. Like, there's a whole lot going on in there. So we want to just dial it back. So I'd never say to someone, look, you absolutely have to stop drinking. But I think we could do the smaller glass. And I actually think a smaller glass, not just a smaller amount of wine in the glass, because it's back to the filling the plate. If I actually hand that to someone, they'd be like, where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
And we do. So it's that filling up a little bit with it. So it's more, if you get onto a smaller glass, the smaller plate, those kind of things, do you remember the little goblets that your grandparents would have had? You remember those little wine glasses? They're brilliant. Because
I'd be raging when I get one of them though, because I'm like, I want the big glass. But I know what you're saying. Psychologically, then you don't need to fill that big one because it's smaller.
And you tend to sip out of a smaller glass.
Yeah.
Whereas a bigger glass, you take a gulp. Whereas so it all just, and the thing is, there's something nice about if you have to refill the glass, something in your brain is going, that is the 3rd time I've picked up that bottle. Whereas if you're actually just you're thinking, I only had 2 glasses of wine. So if you go out and you go to a pub, you might get a standard bottle of wine. It might be 175 mils. So that's nearly 2 drinks. But if you get the 250, that is a 1/3 of a bottle of wine. So you have 3 glasses of those, that's a full bottle of wine. So it's quite a lot. But you're in your head going, well, I only had 3 glasses of wine. So it's just keep an eye on measures with that and just keep it down slightly.
And what about changes that we could possibly make if we do want to have a wee treat at the weekend and have a wee glass to relax? Could we swap wine for something? Is it better to swap it for something else, or is that not really?
Yeah, to be honest, unless you're swapping it for a non-alcoholic drink, because I know someone goes, well, is gin better or is wine? Alcohol is alcohol, so it doesn't matter what version it turns up in. So a lot of it is about just slowing down a little bit. One of the things that has been fantastic, which is a trend I love, is the giant get gin glasses. You know, they get these huge bowls and they're like full of ice. And, if you sip away at that, it ends up taking people like 30, 40 minutes to drink it. Whereas they might have had 2 gins, years ago, and it was the old way.
True.
So that whole thing, I love, put loads of ice in. But if you're drinking white wine, like put ice into it. You've probably done it on holidays. You'd be in Spain and it's hot and they go, "Do you want a bit of ice in your wine?" Like, okay. But it actually just spaces it out a little bit. Sparkling water into the wine, those kind of things, just depending on what you're doing. Think, can I dilute it down a little bit? Then I slow down. And I'd always say, if you're actually going to go out and have a few drinks, the first thing you do is you have a glass of water. Because very often you're thirsty at the start. So you're actually often drinking the drink quite quickly because you're thirsty. Whereas if you have the glass of water, then you're in a mode to actually sip it. So it just slows you down a little bit with that.
That's a good tip. And then that's obviously, it's not a myth about drinking water to kill off any after effects if you are out for the night. And
yeah, if you have a hangover, so often the hangover is caused by dehydration and then by the alcohol actually irritating your.
I actually have a sore head listening. I'm thinking about the sore heads that could possibly happen. Tell me.
But so alcohol dehydrates you. So if you have a headache the next day, it's usually because you're dehydrated. So yes, if you drink water throughout the evening, but hopefully you won't be drinking to the extent that you'd be having a hangover anyway. Yes. But if you do drink plenty of water, that can ease that a little bit for you. And that's the idea of eating with alcohol as well. It doesn't stop any of the negative effects of alcohol. That's the one thing. It doesn't save your liver or anything. It just lines your stomach so maybe you don't feel sick the next day.
That's what I want to talk to you about, and it wasn't in the notes, but I remember in Enniskillen you talked about the big bag of crisps when you're drinking the wine. Because there's a big knock-on effect, isn't there, of your whole choices that evening that lead into the next day. So talk to me, you talked about the big bag of sensations and all, but you actually told me a tip and I do it now. So tell everybody who's listening.
Oh God.
But I can't remember.
You'll have to remind me.
Well, it was about changing that big bag.
Oh, even to smaller. Do you know what I think it is? Is that, alcohol is an appetite stimulant. So again, when I was working with people years ago and we were talking about weight management and like, well, can I drink? And you're like, well, yes, but 1, it has calories. And number 2, it's an appetite stimulant. And number 3, it messes with your sleep. And poor or broken sleep then does make you eat more the next day. So alcohol is a complete disaster when it comes to weight. But if you're having, the thing about it is you have 1 drink and then suddenly you're starting to feel a little bit hungry and then you want salty foods. Very often. So that's when people do go and get, the sharing. I think what I was saying to the sharing bag
of crisps.
Yeah, only open it if you're going to share it. But if you do go for the smaller one, because the full sharing bag of crisps, most of them would have the same amount of crisps as a 6-pack. Oh, yeah. And even if you took the 6-pack into the TV room with you and you're watching TV, at least by the time you're opening the 3rd pack, it's something might go off in your head and go, do you know what? That's a lot of crisps. But I think when it's just there and you're just eating, it's very easy. It's a bit like always put the ice cream in a bowl rather than take the tub, or always put the crisps in a bowl rather than take the whole packet. Because it is when you're drinking and you're not thinking and you're getting hungry and all of that, suddenly there's a huge amount of food coming in.
Oh my God, and that's the knock-on effect of having a wee drink and then a big bottle. Yeah.
But look, any of those things now and again. Do you know what I mean? If you're doing it every day, but if it's your Friday night movie or whatever, we can get too.
Because you like to have a wee drink sometimes too.
I do, absolutely. I love a glass of wine.
Yes, definitely. I know. And sometimes it's that end of that week. But I suppose there's that knock-on effect. I think you mentioned it that day in Enniskillen too, that maybe thinking I might have a glass midweek too, and then it can slip where you want a glass every week, every night and all. And that's a whole other conversation. But it's just being more mindful of your measures.
Keeping an eye on it,
Smaller glasses, even though we love the big trendy glasses for our wine, but the big glasses for the gin works because you get more
the ice into it,
the tonic or whatever. And something that you talked about whenever that day that really hit hard to me, and I rang mummy straight away going down the road, was heart disease. And I suppose we can move on to the way it presents itself in women, because we talked about that. But it is the #1 killer globally, isn't it, heart disease? So talk to us about how we can be mindful of that when we're making our food choices.
So, I mean, there's the lovely thing about heart disease, although it affects a huge amount of us, there is a huge amount you can do to reduce your chances. Now, nothing is going to be guaranteed because genetics are in there and there's all those different things. But a lot of what we talk about in general healthy eating advice really is very, very good for the heart. So we want to keep cholesterol down. And I know sometimes you'll see stuff online going, oh no, cholesterol is fine. No, there's no question or doubt about the fact that we need to keep cholesterol to a nice healthy level. But things like adding in more fibre is brilliant for that. So things like adding in porridge, adding in oats, barley is very good for lowering cholesterol. So if you had a bowl of porridge in the morning, seeds, you were saying you had Lynn ones on, they do flaxseed and things like that. They're brilliant. They help to lower cholesterol. I would tell loads of people, take those, put them in your porridge. So we can add in foods to lower cholesterol. A lot of high fibre foods are great. Then we're going to limit. So we want to limit saturated fat. And I see stuff over the years, lots of people go, oh, no, saturated fat is fine. We should all eat butter. And it's like, much as I love butter and it is gorgeous, unfortunately, saturated fat, it's not brilliant. But what we want to do is we don't need to ban it. We just need to limit. So things like cream and butter, if you do have high cholesterol, bring them down. But your dairy, your other dairy, like your milk, your yogurt, they're absolutely fine, even if you have high cholesterol, because you need the calcium. But other foods like your biscuits and your cakes and your sweets tend to have saturated fat in them. And then a lot of the processed meats, so things like, sausages, black and white pudding, pate, salami, all the nice things. But again, we're not banning them. We're just bringing them down a little bit. And it's just that balance. Bring in the good stuff, bring in the fibres, limit the saturated fat down. And actually that will get you a long way in terms of your cholesterol.
I watched a show, I think you talked about this too, and it's on Netflix, me and Jared, and we never drank milk since.
I know. And it was, I know.
Tell us about this, because watching these shows can make life changes. Like I mean, literally, we haven't drank milk in 7 years.
Yeah.
And then I started to tell all my family and daddy, and was starting to consider not taking milk either.
Yeah.
But then you dispelled that day too a wee bit about different things, because then I was like, and don't be taking the eat real butter, not the margarine.
Yeah.
And tell me, what are we supposed to do, Sarah? There's so much information.
Okay, can I just say, you have to die of something in the end, right? Okay. And, you could die happy, So what I would say to you, I mean, nothing ever comes along good that someone doesn't pop up and go, I'm going to scare you about that and make it bad. So I've no problem, a little tiny bit of butter now and again, totally fine. But if you're someone who uses a lot of spread on bread or toast, if you're using it everything, I would be going for like an olive oil based spread instead. Okay. Now someone will shout, oh, that's ultra processed foods. We have the research and we have huge studies in nutrition tracking like hundreds of thousands of people. And we know that the people using the spreads are living longer and getting less heart disease than the people eating the butter. I wish it wasn't true, but the evidence is just there with it. So it's just about kind of that balance with it. It's just not getting too scared about things. But what you're saying about the dairy is what I've seen, and I'm 30 years between studying and working in nutrition at this stage, is there's just always a trend, and it's the latest trend, and it just goes through cycles. So I was saying 30 years ago, E numbers was the big thing. Then it was fat, so I presume low fat will come in again as another trend in a few years. Then it was low carb, now it's high protein, but it's also every so often people are banning dairy. And people love to hate dairy, and it is such an incredibly nutritious food that it's one I always look at and go, seriously, can we just stop? And people say things, oh, we can't digest it. Yes, we can. Some people have trouble with lactose, but you can get lactose-free milk. Cheese is no problem because there's little to no lactose in it. Totally fine. We get great nutrition out of it. Now, some people are genuinely allergic to it. More likely to be children. It's unusual to have an adult who's allergic to milk. Now, they are out there, but it's quite unusual. More common in children, but the leading food allergy is egg allergy. But people often think anything going wrong with their kid is, oh, I'll take them off the dairy. Maybe don't, because it's actually very difficult to get your calcium if you don't take the dairy. It's not impossible. But what I find is 30 years working in nutrition, most people when they cut out dairy are not hitting their calcium targets with it, which is just such an issue for the bones. Dairy is fine. If you don't like it, feel free not to drink it, but I wouldn't cut it out for any health reason.
Oh, I feel so bad, all the people I've tainted. So that we watched that and we were I was convinced, and very I don't even take milk in my tea or coffee now because of it. So I suppose it's people listening to be mindful of the information they're consuming. Yeah. Because it just shapes how you make your choices.
Yeah, if you ever watch a documentary and it's a big scaremongering documentary, go online and see if you can find any registered dietitians talking about it, because they'll actually give you, like, at this stage, I actually don't watch most documentaries on nutrition on the TV because there's so much misinformation in there that actually I just
So we'll just email you.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
We're going to put the link in the show notes to email Sarah if we see anything scary. But it's true, like I just think, and I'm ashamed to say I've kind of guided the children away from drinking milk too, and I'm like, oh my God. But anyway, I now know since that day that that's probably not the right information that I was consuming. So what about this is what the shocker, heart disease, the different symptoms in men and women, because I did not know this and I now do.
Well, I actually try and put that into, no matter what talk I'm doing, whether I'm talking about gut health or anything, I'll actually come in and go, by the way, did you know heart attack symptoms can look quite different in women? Because what we tend to see is most of our experience with heart attacks is watching someone on TV. And what you see on TV, it's always a man, and he always grabs his chest and then falls down on the floor. And that's the heart attack. So a lot of us think that that's a heart attack, and we don't think women. But 1 in 4 women die from heart disease and 1 in 4 men die from heart disease. So the risk for heart disease is identical between men and women. So we can't just think men all the time. So we have to think women. But we know that women are up to twice as likely to die of a heart attack than a man because we don't always see the women's symptoms. So when we talk about heart attack, we often talk about, okay, chest pain, you might get pain down your arm, pain up into your jaw, feel dizzy, things like that. But 40% of women get no chest pain with a heart attack. They get a lot of stomach. So you might get, now it's bad nausea, vomiting, indigestion. Now it's quite bad. You're not sort of popping an antacid and going about your day. You're kind of thinking, maybe I need to actually get the doctor in. So bad nausea, vomiting, indigestion, often, but not always, but often with left shoulder or upper shoulder or down into the upper back pain. So in the same way, if a man was sort of having chest pain, you're thinking, right, I need to go to the hospital. From now on, if a woman is having a bad stomach, and especially if there's any back or shoulder pain, straight to the hospital as well.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people don't know that. And I'd always say, if you don't know this, if you're listening and you don't know this, please tell 3 other people. Get the word out, because too many women just don't go to the hospital because of that.
How scary. And it was
Yeah.
around the time you told that someone locally,
Yeah.
I told you, had passed away, and she'd been sick, had been vomiting, and obviously, the symptoms weren't as well. I don't know what unfolded, but I just had heard then that it was heart, and I was thinking, God, I never would have thought of sickness in your stomach.
Yeah. But I think we often we talk about guys if they have indigestion for 3 days that turned out to be a heart attack. So it's the same sort of idea. But it's also funny, about 60% of women do get chest pain. But the thing you see is that when women get chest pain, we tend to make them a cup of tea. You're just like, no, let's take her to the hospital. So it's just to have that shift, because we're not thinking heart disease for women, and we really need to, because we are just losing women to it unnecessarily.
Right. So more women are dying because we don't recognise the symptoms. Right, we need to change that. So we'll hopefully create a wee piece of content out of this podcast and make sure people share that with 3 people. That's the action.
So actually on my Instagram page at Sarah Keogh RD, I have a video on the top of my page, which is your heart attack syndromes in women. So people can have a look at that. And if they share that, that would be fantastic.
That's right. I'll direct people to that as well. Because save lives, you sharing that on. So I really wanted to talk about that. And then, what about daily diet and lifestyle swaps that could lower the risk for all of us? And you did mention a few things there, but what could we be doing? Like Linwoods always say, small changes for a healthier life or a better feeling better. What small things could we be doing to lower the risk of heart disease?
So I love that small changes idea, because I think sometimes people look at their diet and it's like it's too much to change everything, and it is. So I would say start by adding fibre. If you're going to do one thing to reduce your risk of heart disease, add your fibre. So whether that's adding high fibre cereals for breakfast, so your oats, look at your high fibre cereals that are out there. I love the Linwood seeds. Those ground up seeds are fantastic. A good spoonful of those into sort of cereal and stuff in the morning is a brilliant way to add fibre. Get your fruit and veg in at every meal. Like literally just make it a habit. I'm having breakfast, lunch, dinner, there's a bit of fruit or there's a bit of veg here, and whole grains. And we know straight away, just nudging up that fibre. And even if today all you do is start a high fibre cereal, and next week you might add some seeds to it, and a week after, it doesn't all have to be straight away, because it actually takes a year to change your eating habits. It's not all going to click. And you're going to come forward and back, and there'll be days you're busy, there's definitely days you'll forget about it, and then it comes back. But be patient and gentle with yourself on it, and just get into the habit. That's it. I always think that's a lovely one. Just get the fibre up. It solves so many problems, not just heart. It's so good for the gut. It's so good for everything else. That's a nice one just to tip away on.
Think fibre. And think fibre in every meal you eat.
Yeah.
Which I don't think a lot of us would be thinking of. So trying to get the veg on the plate or the fruit after dinner or whatever it may be. And what about family? So there's a lot of people that listen to this are family, definitely family audience of My Dig Mama anyway. And we're all trying to deal with our kids' eating habits, maybe picky eaters. Like, and also for adults, a big thing is, as a family, like snacking. So if I'm feeding the kids and I'm making sure they've got theirs, I'll be snacking on something. So any advice for families on how to eat better? Is better the right word? How to be more aware? I don't know what the right language is.
It's very hard at the moment, because I have teenagers as well, and people are coming and going, and it's different times, and they're in and they're out. And I gave up there last year, and I actually started doing loads of dinners that could just be easily reheated. So the spaghetti bolognese, where I can make it and I can have mine, and my husband comes in later than me, he might have his. We definitely try and get the family, because I think that sitting down, that conversation is very, very important. So the Sunday dinner in our house is non-negotiable. You want to have a really good excuse, but it's that time just to actually, because I think that family interaction is important. But I think, again, don't stress. You're trying to get, I have to do stews, curries, things like that can just be reheated, because then people can come and go. It can be hard to negotiate everybody's what they all like. And, if you do have a really fussy eater, and I do a lot of work in fussy eaters, I would just say not everyone gets their favourite food every day. Like in my house, I absolutely don't cook 2 meals. I cook 1 meal. And if you happen to not like that meal, I'm sorry for you. And at this stage, you can fry an egg or you can make a sandwich, and tough luck, and get over it. And that's actually how we just run it. So my kids, you'll actually hear them saying, "Oh, we have to fend for ourselves tonight." I was like, "Yep, I'm having this, and that's what I'm making." And I know, but it's, what is that?
Do you ever get anybody backlashing against that?
No, in fairness, they're good kids, but they're...
No, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about when you say that out loud.
People actually go, "Oh my God, my child is going to die of starvation." And you're like, not for one evening. They will be all right for one evening, because I see that, the trouble is you end up cooking 2 meals, but then when I don't cook a separate meal, the child who doesn't like the meal will eat a bit of it.
Yeah.
So it actually just keeps the door open on some other foods like that. Or I've actually learned to cook. Now, because I'm a dietitian, I would be aware from a young age, get them cooking. So even when my kids were 3, I have videos of them making scrambled eggs. And now, not tidily, but they were making it. But it means now, say, you know, my kids could do a whole roast dinner and all of that sort of stuff. And it's not about me going, I'm such an amazing mom, my kids can make a roast dinner. It's that there's some Sundays I can go, I'm not cooking. Can you do the leg of lamb? And one of my kids will actually kind of get on. I'm not saying he'll happily do it, but go and do it. But it's to have that skill. And I think that's a lovely thing, is that life skill. And there shouldn't be one person in the house who does all the cooking. That it's important to teach your kids, the boys as well, because we still have that thing where it's just the girls. We want the guys learning, because then they've good nutrition later. You know, if they go out of home and they don't know how to make a dinner or how to put a dinner together, or that there has to be vegetables, they kind of lose that. So I think from a family point of view, getting everybody where you can in cooking, try and have some veg all the time. With that and frozen veg is just as good as fresh, so that's really handy. Salads are great, you know, and it doesn't always have to be a big bowl of lettuce. Chop up a cucumber, something like that. It's more just, is there a bit of veg there? But one of my favorite things, I have to say, I got this from a friend of mine who's a dietitian. She says she plays a game with her kids since they were small called While You're Waiting. So she chops up loads of fruit and vegetables while she's cooking dinner, and the kids come in and go, oh, I'm starving, is dinner ready yet? She says, here, eat that cucumber while you're waiting. And then they come back 10 minutes later and say, here, eat that apple while you're waiting. And she says, while they're waiting, they've had like 3 servings of fruit and veg. And I thought that is a genius of an idea.
But then I'd be afraid that they wouldn't eat their dinner.
Well, to a point, if they're kind of young and running around, they'll still come in and eat the protein in. You might not put as much veg on the plate. You know, you kind of balance it out. But it's that's 30 minutes where you want them hungry for dinner, but they're tormenting you because they're hungry.
And they want a snack then to fill in the gap.
Yeah.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, pop it in there.
I know, because you do hear a lot of people, oh, I have to make him this and her this and all, and you're feeling sorry for them in that way, but you're also thinking, right, are you creating a monster here?
Sometimes it's necessary, and I have worked with people with fussy eating, and you know, there's a lot of things behind it. So for some families, that is just what has to happen, and that's okay. And that's why I'd say to you, look, if you buy a lasagna one of the days instead of making it from scratch yourself, that's okay.
Freedom. When you say that, it's like, thank God you're saying that, because it's hard. And I try to cook as much as I can, but like I'm here today for 3 days recording, and I've left like a pre-made shepherd's pie that we picked up in the thing. You know, there's
my husband bought 2 pizzas yesterday because I told him I wouldn't be there for dinner, and he was like, oh, I'll just buy 2 pizzas. I was like, grand, go.
And you know what? You can't worry about that. It's busy life. As long as we do our best we can when we are there in education and all. So I like that you're freeing us up in that way. And what about, so anyway, what I wanted to get on to now is quick fire questions if you're ready for them, right? Because I like when you hit somebody with something they don't know what you're going to say. So if I eat carbs at night, am I doomed?
God, no, that's totally fine. Actually, you'll sleep a little bit better. So maybe don't have like an entire slice pan or anything like that. But you know, a lot of the times if people aren't sleeping, a little bowl of cereal going to bed actually does really nice things for that. Trying to go to, like, what I would see is lots of people who are like trying to lose weight and they're hungry all day, and then they're going to bed and they're so hungry they can't sleep. Little bit of carbs, no, totally fine.
There you go. That's freedom again. One so-called health food that you secretly roll your eyes at. Maybe it's not secretly at all. Maybe it's publicly.
All of them. Honestly, when someone comes out and goes, this is a superfood, I'm like, oh, here we go again. Because I remember at one stage they were trying to get black pudding launched as a superfood as well. And I was like, okay, the line has been drawn here. To be honest, there's some really good superfoods out there. There's nothing I'd kind of go, don't eat. Because usually when they say something is a superfood, there's something going on with it. But I would say, what happens with superfoods is people think if I'm just eating this one, I have everything. So do you remember when everyone was eating kale?
Yes, kale. Oh my God.
It took far too long for people to realise how horrible it was. Now, I actually like kale. Do you make kale crisps?
But when you eat a big bowl of kale, it's like eating a big bowl of nothing.
Well, I tell you, get good exercise in your facial
muscles. I know, it's so hard to chew.
So stuff like that, but it's not the only thing. So even if you're having a superfood, you still need all your other nutrients and foods as well.
I think you might have answered this already, but red wine, good for your health? Or is that a myth?
No. Oh. Sadly, no. I wish it was. It is definitely a myth.
Because is it really good? All the Mediterranean, the people in Italy and all that, and the French and all, and they embrace that.
They drink 500 mils of wine a week.
Right.
2 of those glasses.
Right.
A week.
Okay.
On average. So it is, I mean, the thing about the red wine is that you're looking at, there is lovely antioxidants in the red wine, but it's not offsetting the harmful, unfortunately, side effects of alcohol. But you get those antioxidants by eating the grapes. So
right.
It's available to you. Eat the grapes.
There you go. But look, it's good to dispel that it's actually not good for health. If my child only eats beige food for a week, should I panic or should I chill out?
If it is just for a week, I would not worry about it. Kids go through lots of phases, especially younger kids. You know, at that age 2 to 3, they do a lot of experimentation with foods. And sometimes you'll get a 2-year-old who was eating everything, and then they're like, I'm not eating that this week. The worst thing you can do is have a row with them over it. The best thing you can do is just keep offering it and say nothing and let them get on with it. If it though develops into where they're very restricted with the food, yes, I would seek some help there a little bit. That's usually a sensory thing with that. So I'd work with a lot of kids who might be autistic, and they can often have how food feels in their mouth can be just uncomfortable, it can be a little overwhelming. So sometimes if everything is the same color and the same shape, and you will see some kids will go for the same brand of chicken nuggets all the time, but that's because it's consistent. Like if you take a box of blueberries, some of them will be soft and some of them will be hard, and they'll be big and they'll be small. It's very inconsistent. But for some people, I know if I get this brand of chicken nuggets, I know exactly what it's going to feel like in my mouth. So that's often what's driving that. And then sometimes people are like, oh, no, you have to eat all this veg. And it becomes quite overwhelming for the child. So you might look at the sensory side of things like that for them. And even the sensory environment. I work with a lot of sensory kids. If we do things like get them really comfy, like bamboo socks, turn off all the radio and the television and all the noise and dim the lights slightly, a lot of them they haven't got all that sensory input and they actually just start to eat. So if it's just for a week, I wouldn't worry about it. But if it's going on and they're getting very restricted, we might just have a look at what's going on there.
Okay, good advice there. Coffee. Guilty pleasure or a liquid vegetable?
Really good for you.
What?
It's really interesting. And actually, I'm a tea drinker. I don't even like a whole lot of coffee. I'll drink it the odd time, but it's so interesting. Every time they do studies on coffee to make it bad for you, they keep finding that it's actually better for you than they thought. So at this stage, they think that coffee helps to reduce your risk of heart disease, liver cancer, colon cancer, dementia, endometrial cancer, and there was another one, liver. So it's actually every time they look at coffee, they're like, oh my God, it's really good for you. So it's liquid vegetable. It is. I said I'm not even a particularly big fan of it. The only thing I would say is it does have the caffeine, and huge amounts of caffeine are going to affect your sleep. And even if you're someone who thinks, well, I can drink a cup of coffee and go straight to sleep, we know from the studies you're not getting your deep sleep. We know you're not. And the bad news is that once you're over 40, you're worse at metabolizing coffee. So you're meant to stop around 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right, okay.
But
you hear that, Eamon, behind the camera? He's many cups of coffee as he had today, but that's interesting. No, at least you don't have to make yourself feel bad, because I do love coffee, but you're right, I would try as much as I can not to have it after.
I'd often joke about kind of, the milky coffees, the lattes and the cappuccinos, between the milk with the calcium and the coffee that's so good for you, it's like it's a health drink, so go for it.
Yes, okay, right, and I've limited my milk, but anyway, it's interesting to know that. Very good. So what's the most well, that's back to the superfood. What's the most overrated superfood ever? Is it the kale? Is it what is it?
It was actually pretty good. There were so many of them out there. I think the blueberries got and they are so front and centre. Like I can tell you, in the year 2000, nobody'd heard of a blueberry in Ireland. So 25 years ago, this was brand new. I remember, I don't know who brought out wild blueberry juice or something at one stage. There was all of these things, and suddenly blueberries were everywhere, and they're grand. They've a really nice compound in them called, and it's a good word, it's called anthocyanin, but it's actually very good for your brain. And we know that that's quite good, but cocoa is also really good for your brain in terms of just improving blood flow. So that's quite nice with it. But it's not the be all and end all. Like, as I said, with any of the superfoods, it's your whole diet. It's not that having a terrible way of eating and then you eat a blueberry and you're going to be okay. So I wish.
I know. Is skipping breakfast really that bad?
It's not brilliant. And I think, again, I'd work with lots of people like, I don't want to have breakfast, but when you get them to do it, they are just happier. And I think that tells me everything I need to know about it. And you can do studies and all the rest on it. But what we know for a fact is, particularly studies in children, if they eat breakfast, they take in more knowledge at school and they are more comfortable. So the teacher is happier. We get hangry people too. So we know that their learning is better, their education is better with that. And that's the same for adults. You're just in better form. And I think it's one of those things, you'll start eating breakfast, you're not going to have like a light bulb moment to go, oh wow, I'm feeling amazing. But you'll miss it on a day a few weeks in and you go, oh wow, I didn't realize how bad I was feeling until I actually started eating breakfast, which is why I'm not a massive fan of intermittent fasting. I think it can be very helpful for some people, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think breakfast just sets people up. And the other thing that's important about breakfast is when you eat in the mornings, it sends a very powerful signal down through your gut to kind of get it to move. And that's why a lot of people will go to the bathroom within an hour of having their breakfast. It's actually, it's a very important reflex. So if someone's having issues with things like bloating or constipation, actually eating breakfast is a very important kind of push to kind of get things moving for you.
Good, that's good advice, and something people mightn't realise. So what's one food swap that makes a big difference but no one notices?
Honestly, fibre.
Fibre, that's a big thing.
It really does, yeah. And I think people underestimate it. And I think it's everybody. I always say everybody thinks they're eating enough fibre, and very few people are eating. Like, if you think you're eating enough fibre, I guarantee you're not. There might, unless you're a vegetarian or vegan and you're getting loads of beans and lentils in, most people are not. And honestly, fibre is so underrated. It's so boring. but it really, really works.
What about, and this isn't on the questions, adding like an additive, fibre additive? I see like different ones you can add, like, because it's hard to get all that fruit and veg and all in.
You can use the fibre supplements and they're very helpful, and I'd often use them, but most of them only have 3 to 5 grams of fibre in them, and you need to be getting at least 25 grams of fibre a day. So it's a top up and it's helpful, and certainly in some situations I would use them, but I would always love food first. And you know what, those things like those ground up seeds are brilliant for adding fibre. I love them. I think they're brilliant for that. So a little change like that. I'd say even start with that. Start putting seeds into yogurt and porridge. Straight away you'll actually have your fibre up.
I actually put flaxseed into my spaghetti bolognese the other night and not one new.
No way. I sneak lentils in from time to time and I'm still getting, actually I probably shouldn't have told you that. But anyway,
getting away with it.
I was getting away with it.
There is ways that you can do it.
Yeah.
If you could ban one nutrition myth forever, what would it be?
Oh, do you know, when you actually think about how many there are, I think the idea that dairy is bad for everybody. I would love, and I know you were saying it because so many people have that myth with it. And, you know, really it's a perfectly good, really nutritious food. And in particular, one I'm seeing raising its head recently is the idea that dairy causes acne. And there have literally been 0 studies done where they have taken acne out of the diet of teenagers and their acne's gone away. Not one single study. And yet I meet loads of teenagers been taken off that. So I'd love to see that one go, actually.
There you go. That's really good for people to know. One golden rule to end for eating well. What one rule would you like people to leave with?
I would love people to enjoy a really good treat and never think about it again. No guilt. Just eat and forget. I'd love you to do that.
We will. We promise we will. I didn't think you were going to say that. I thought you were going to say, well, you know, include more fibre or whatever. That's good, because that makes people's shoulders drop and be able to enjoy as well what we're eating.
Well, it's okay to have a bar of chocolate. It's okay to have. I was doing a talk this morning in Dublin, and it was in this hotel, and they had these gorgeous handmade chocolate chip cookie biscuits. And I was sitting outside in the foyer doing something, and I knew they had come out from the course. And you had to go, we better eat all those biscuits before the dietitian comes in. And I was like, I'm the dietitian who's going to come and tell you to eat them because they are absolutely gorgeous. You know, it's okay to have a cookie. 70 cookies maybe not going to be healthy for you, but one is totally okay.
I love that. Okay, we'll have a cookie after this. I want to thank you for being on the Dig podcast. How can people now follow? I know that you do a lot of media work and obviously corporate talks, but how can people connect with you after this? Where's the best place? And tell us.
So they can get me through my website, eatwell.ie, and I'm on Instagram at Sarah Keogh RD.
And we'll link all those in the show notes. And anyone that's listening that has a business or a corporate organisation, that's where I saw Sarah speak. But you didn't turn into a corporate person when you were delivering the talk. And I think that's why it was so hard hitting. Just normal, telling us what we need to hear in a real way with a bit of crack through. And it really made people listen and made me want you here today. So if anybody's listening in that field and would like Sarah, you can get all the links in the show notes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being my guest, making the journey, and maybe you'll come back again and we'll dispel all those other myths that are out there. There's not enough time in the one session.
We have to do it. There's so much, but look, thanks. It's been lovely to come and talk to you.
Thank you, and thank you to you, the Dig podcast listener, for tuning in again this week. And remember that request I asked you at the start. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or on Apple or Spotify, hit the follow button, and then we'll maybe get Sarah back the next time. Thank you, and I will see you next time on the Dig podcast.